the other thing that I think is a huge underlying theme of this podcast is to have those upfront conversations, especially about money. Have you set aside any money for this project?
My own strategy is if someone reaches out to me and I'm genuinely intrigued by what they do and have no experience in it at all, I immediately accept the meeting. Because if it's an opportunity right off the rip to just learn, there's nothing more important than learning. Hello, and welcome to Storytime with Heidi and Jeff.
Today's episode, we're going to do something that is a little different.
Yep.
So last week, we had people call in live.
Yes.
Super fun.
It was
good.
good.
Yeah, it was great.
I liked it.
I did too. All the students calling in, that was awesome.
Yes.
So this week, I want to do something that I'm hopeful we can keep repeating, which is that I had people call in and leave a voicemail last night.
Okay. All right. So you know what the questions are, but I don't.
I do, yeah.
That's the right way to do it.
You're much better on your feet.
Yeah, well, I think, why am I better on my feet? It's an interesting question. I think it's probably just the jobs and the things I've done throughout life dictated I needed to be.
Yeah.
And then we were mocking me earlier. I guess I was mocking me. And I studied communication. So, most of it is just BS. How do you talk to people? And it is important in life.
If I told you what to do for this podcast, like, hey, I need you to say blah, blah, blah.
It would be really boring.
Well, no, not boring. You would just be not great at it.
No, I wouldn't. I'd be like, well, Heidi, here's what we're supposed to say today.
That's right.
Just wouldn't come out good.
It would not come out good. You're much better on the fly.
I got here a little earlier than you today, and I was just like, oh, let me clear my notifications on my phone because I hate red numbers on my phone. So I was clearing them out, and I went on LinkedIn, and I saw a clip, and I was like, oh, man. I'm wearing the same shirt I was last week. You know what? I'm not. And it's such a good story. It's such a story Heidi would appreciate, and I don't know if anybody else would.
I think I've worn this exact outfit 3 times on the podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I haven't. But here's what I did do. So I'm a big Stitch Fix guy. Do you know what Stitch Fix is?
I sure do.
Yeah, so you get a box of clothes every month, and actually these are Stitch Fix and these and this. And so about 3 weeks ago, I got this shirt. It might have been the shirt. And I put it on and I was like, this is my new favorite shirt. And I'm very dramatic like that. Like when I put on a shirt that I love, this is my favorite shirt. And I was like, okay, but the problem is it's a long sleeve like flannel thing. Feel how soft that is. Right?
That's very soft.
So,
that would drive me nuts.
So I went on Stitch Fix and I was like, I'm going to order another one. Mm-hmm. And turns out they had 4 different colors. And so I ordered 2 of all 4. So I now have 8 shirts, and 2 of them are the same of each color, and this is what I'm wearing for the entire winter. I have a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday shirt.
So do you know that I have pants that are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
No,
Thursday,
I don't, but
yeah, so
it makes sense to me.
It's embroidered in the inside of the
weird.
pants. And so so I have pants. They're all hung. So by outfit.
Yep.
It's a little different now because I'm not going to the office, so they're all office clothes.
Yeah.
But it's like a running joke with my old colleagues. They'd be like, so are those like your Wednesday pants? I was like, yeah, absolutely.
This is almost out of Seinfeld.
A little bit out of Seinfeld, but they're very cool pants.
All right. I am here for it. I just wanted you to know that I am not wearing the same shirt, but I might be wearing the same shirt. I don't know. I just have 2 of the same shirt now.
If you ever see me in slacks, they are by the day of the week.
What are slacks? Slacks
are not jeans.
Okay, so anything that's not jeans.
Well, this is not a slack. This is like a leisure wear.
I would call those wind pants.
These are kind of like a leisure wear wind pant, but they're Orvis.
Oh, fancy. Yeah. I actually think I might have the same pants.
I bet you do.
That's amazing, actually.
That is amazing.
I think I do have the same exact pants.
That's beautiful.
Oh, man, that's good. So here we are wearing the same clothes.
Yeah, so I've got some voicemails with some questions for entrepreneurs.
You want to jump into it?
I do. So right. I know the questions. You don't know the questions.
Yep.
They're pretty good.
Okay, let's do it.
So if you're a founder who is thinking about pitching investors and are nervous about the way that your pitch deck looks, there is a service called Hate Your Deck. Michael Lightman and I are very good friends, and he's developed this proprietary method for putting together pitch decks. And, I do see a lot of template pitch decks when I see founders pitch me, and those pitch decks are not super effective. So if you're interested in developing a very customized deck, you should reach out to Michael at Hate Your Deck. His email and his website are in the show notes. I do know he's going to be offering some live courses soon, which might be a good option for you if you are interested in developing a custom pitch deck. I've got our first caller. You're going to love this question.
Okay.
Hey, Heidi and Jeff. Big fan, first time caller. It's Eugene O'Neill. My business is Mixing the Medicine. That is my art handle. I'm a muralist and art educator, MIX, Mixing the Medicine. I've done a ton of youth programming with Jade Warwick and Amplified Voices, and a ton of murals in schools and a lot of art and wellness programming around the area, as well as in California. I would love to do any type of work with anyone who's willing to take an interest in public art and what I can do to enhance their spaces and add a lot of value. My question is, I've been writing a lot of proposals lately, and with proposals that are kind of on the fence, you obviously understand the clients that are just like ready and prepared. Budgets always come into play. And then you get clients that are kind of on the fence, or it takes a little bit longer to close, or maybe it's not the right time. But when a proposal's on the fence, what do you do to add that value, to assure them, to make them feel more comfortable without compromising my value or my price? Obviously, I know I can offer ranges, but sometimes that doesn't even really assure a client, they back out. So I would love to hear more insight on ways to be more innovative for clients who are on the fence with proposals. Thank you so much. Y'all are doing a great job. Have a great night.
Good question.
Yeah.
So essentially, what do you do when you're proposing something to a client and they are not willing to necessarily jump in right away because of budget?
I don't know whether to answer this question from the perspective of overarching business trying to get work, or if I hyper-focus on Eugene's comment about public art, which I'm quite literally obsessed with, right? So how do you want me to answer that?
I think you should talk about the public art. Let's do it. Let's dive into it.
I could do hours on public art, and I don't think it would be boring. There are cities around the country who specialize in public art. I by no means have been everywhere, but I've been to a lot of places, and my two favorite spots are Philadelphia and Denver, which both thrive on public art. Philadelphia, in particular, is a really wonderful test case for upstate New York because a gazillion years ago, that's my number when I don't actually know how long ago, I just say a gazillion years, they made a switch to how they do economic development. And they made it a point where new developments coming into a city were charged, I believe, a full point on a project. And that money had to go to some sort of public art, which is why you see incredible murals and statues and everything when you're walking through the streets of Philadelphia, right? It's just like a wonderful place to live and exist in. Locally, we have such an infrastructure screaming for public art, and you can look to a few different cities around here that have done it well. We did it really well in Troy a bunch of years ago with the Uncle Sam statues, even though we had a vandalist that was running around lopping the heads off the statues. That one was a little too close to my heart. Albany has done a magnificent job. One of the few things you can say Albany has done a magnificent job in the last decade. That was driven by the arts community. In particular, it was driven by Tony Idiasico, and that's how I say his last name, and I don't know if it's actually how you say his last name. It's close enough. Tony is the big boss at the Albany Center Gallery and thrives on a mission of not only must we do public art, but we must pay the artist. So Eugene's question is fantastic. So I would like to say, I raise my hand and we volunteer our walls for public art all the time. That shouldn't be a hard thing in this region, but it is because most of our real estate owning class of people are old school in their mindsets, and the idea of someone painting one of their walls and them not having control over it, right? Because if you really believe in public art, you sort of have to give the artists the freedom to go do it. And that can be challenging. We have done in our group a couple of really fantastic murals. And I think I'm literally blessed to be able to sit here and say to you, I have favorite muralists in the region. right? Like what a cool thing that could be for our region to actually be able to build off of something that I can name multiple people who do murals and who are my favorites. I'm not going to do it because we don't want to get hammered, but Jade. So cool. But his question is so solid.
Oh, yeah.
Because it goes back to some of the stuff that we talked to very early on here, in that we don't have a for-profit business climate that encourages these types of things, right?
Yeah. And I think if you were to put it in a broader business conversation, right? So anytime that you are proposing something to someone, you want to see what their pain point is and like what value you can bring to them to solve that pain point. And so I feel like what's very interesting about Eugene's question, people do not connect public art with a pain point because it's too distant for them. And so I think that can be a big issue to tackle.
It's a massive disconnect where, I will name like First Columbia is a good example of people who get public art and have paid pretty sizable chunks of money to have massive murals done on their building. We did too in downtown Albany, but they were paid for by the state as part of a DRI grant. They were both over $100,000. These are not cheap investments, right? If you want to do a 50-foot tall mural by 30 feet wide, like it's going to cost you $100,000.
It's also very hard too, because I feel like with some other projects, you can be like, well, let me scope it down.
Yeah.
So that, this is something that fits within your budget. But with a mural, like if you're doing the side of a building, it is what it is. If you're doing the side of the building,
Yeah. So it's Eugene in particular is up against it, and so is the arts community, because we as a region of 1 million people have not yet adopted the fact that public art gives back in value, financial value, right? There's a disconnect there that we haven't proven out, even though there are studies across the board that say there's been a few released in the last couple of weeks that suggest what the arts community can bring into a region. We are primed because we have the talent to do it. But we are leaning into organizations locally, nonprofit arts organizations locally, to grab the bull by the horns and sort of drag the region into the 21st century.
Yeah, and I think it's also a question of leadership, right? Because in many, many, many cities, I think it's a question of leadership. It's a question of economic development. It's a question of who finds that value to be there. And so I guess the question I would pose for us is like, what do we do to show the value proposition of public art better?
Yeah, this is one of the few things I would say that locally we're actually doing a pretty good job of. I think that we are building up the concept of public art in a real way. And the frustration that's sort of leaking out of your comment is that it's just not moving fast enough, which is, a common theme.
Well,
on the
I think
podcast.
it's actually more of a question of Eugene. So what Eugene is saying is, yes, people want public art, but they're not willing to pay for it.
They're not willing to pay for it. And
right.
that's what I mean with the disconnect of it doesn't have the value, right? The value proposition is not there. If I spend $100,000 on a mural, am I going to get $100,000 back? I think yes, but I also know that I'm in the minority of property owners in the region, right? Like when I tour people through downtown Albany and I show them what we've done, I make sure that we walk by these two 50-foot murals that were done by Black artists that are very like in your face and like make you think and talk and say, yeah, this is what we're all about down here. And they're, they stand out in Albany as like, wow, these are wild investments that were made. If we duplicated it and then, let's times it by 2 and then times it by 50. Let's say we did 100 murals in downtown Albany. Think about the foot traffic that would emanate from 100 murals that you have to see, and here's a map.
Yeah. I mean, and just to get kind of practical about it, I mean, you and I both work on very long-term projects that are sometimes very difficult to tie directly to a pain point. It's not like we're saying, you kind of said if you spend $100 or $100,000 on a mural, are you going to get $100,000 back? Yeah, like over what period of time, over what, I think it is truly very difficult to say. I mean, even to the economic development work that I do, so like CEG is developing this regional entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Yeah. I
mean, my value proposition to them, I mean, we're very lucky that we have CEG who believes in doing that because it is a very long-term thing.
It's a 20-year investment where, it's that old saying, like the best time to plant a tree is yesterday, and the second best time is today. I think that's how it goes.
I think that is how it goes.
It's close enough, right? So yes, it's good that we've started To answer Eugene's question, I don't know that there is actually a path to convince people who don't get it right away to do it. And I think you're probably better off spending your time finding the right people as opposed to finding the right building.
Yeah. What I would definitely agree with is that, in any type of proposal, you have to qualify if the person can buy from you.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
if somebody does not have the budget or does not believe, like, they do not qualify as somebody that you want to sell to.
Yeah. So a good example for me personally right now, I'm working on a very, very, very large investment in downtown Albany that would be in the neighborhood of $400 million. I have, at least at the moment, right, and things get cut and they get moved, but like, if you don't have it in now, when are you ever going to have it? I have put aside 1%, which is, $4 million, to do the money where your mouth is thing and have $4 million of public art be a part of it, right? And it's over the course of like 6 blocks, and it's a bunch of buildings, and it's a big thing. And I've talked to Tony about that briefly, and I have some people earmarked in my head for, okay, if we do this, let's do it. And then what we would be doing in downtown Albany is we would be starting a real epicenter for what public art could look like in the region. And I think that will help launch it.
Yeah.
But that's like, I sort of still need to win the lottery on that.
And the final thing that I will say,
Yeah.
just for Eugene and I think for other people,
Yeah.
is like there are many different ways to get projects, right? And one of them is to just like increase the number of people you're talking to and the number of potential leads that you have, right? And so understanding that for public art, and I don't think that Eugene is only talking about public art, right? He does education as well.
Yeah.
But and he's working not just in New York State, but also in California, right? And so if you develop a bigger just funnel of people, right? And you start to qualify them to figure out like, okay, this person believes in public art. This person has the budget for public art. And you might just say, do you have the budget now?
Yeah.
I mean, not that crassly, but I think you can ask that.
You got to feel people out, right?
You got to feel people out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm learning. I'm a slow learner, but I'm learning the concept of just how valuable a quick no is.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Right? Like the quick no is so much better than the long maybe.
I know.
Right?
I know.
And the yes, sure, okay, sometimes yeses take a while, but refining what your approach is to people to the point where you can at least intuitively feel in your gut whether something is real or not, right?
100%.
I have people tell me all the time, yeah, we're totally in. And I'll leave the meeting and think, I am not even following up with that. Like, done.
Yeah.
I know in my heart that that's not happening.
And then the final thing I would say is just a practical piece of advice is not to be writing proposals until you know if someone is qualified to do business with you. So like if you are spending your time writing proposals, that's taking away from time that you could be doing that other lead generation, right? So having that upfront conversation, I think, is just incredibly important. Like if someone's having an upfront conversation with you and they ask you, you say, I want to do this public art project, and they say, what do you have a budget for that?
Yeah.
And when are you looking to execute on that? You're not going to be offended.
No.
Not at all. And I think sometimes people wait to talk about money until they submit a proposal. I mean,
100%.
I was doing that for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And then you submit a proposal to somebody and it has this number on it, and then you start the negotiation about money, and that's just kind of silly.
I would agree. It's very challenging. There's a little bit of privilege in the way you describe that, right? So I think one of the it's easier to say that when you're not starving, right? When you are efficient at killing what you eat, you can refine your skill set to the point where you understand what you just said.
But I would argue that especially...
Don't argue with me.
I would argue that especially if you're starving,
Yeah.
you should know up front whether or not you should be writing a proposal for someone.
The advice is fantastic and accurate. What I'm trying to do is lob some grace at the people over there who are struggling with, I need work, I need money, and any opportunity looks like if I turn that rock over, there might be $1 underneath it.
Well, this is a perfect setup for our next question.
Oh, wow.
Are you ready?
That. All right.
Hey, Heidi, what's going on? This is Dean. Hope you have been absolutely amazing. Super excited about your guys' podcast. My business is Vanta Partners, and my question is around pricing and cost of doing business, right? So how do you handle conversations with clients or potential clients who, when you're pitching your product or service, would ask you to lower your price, or in our case, because Vanta Partners is a recruiting agency, sometimes they ask us to lower our fees. And this always kind of tricked me up a little bit. I don't want to, devalue my service, but I also don't want to lose a possible client. So it's, a little bit of a dance to answer this question, but I'd love some advice on that from you and Jeff. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon.
Wow. Great question. I feel like it's amazing that these two people called in same day with very similar topics.
Yeah.
I did not do that on purpose.
I appreciate that you let it flow authentically.
I did.
Yeah.
I wonder how that's going to go next week. So I've known Dean for a long time,
Okay.
and have seen him grow Vanta Partners. He was actually at Apprenda for a long time in-house doing talent acquisition for them, essentially. And he has a great service. And so when he asked that question, I was like, yeah, I guess for me, again, it comes back to kind of the qualifying the person, right? Because I understand not wanting to lose business. I mean, you mentioned somebody, you don't want to throw away business when, you're starving, right? But for me, I think it just comes back to that value proposition and qualifying the person, right? It comes down to like what you want to do. I have a number in my head that is the lowest that I would go for somebody, or the lowest that I would go for a project that like I really want to work on. And I have to be pretty disciplined about that, because if I don't, all of a sudden I end up doing all these projects that just, just take up my time, right? It's because it's a opportunity cost.
Yeah. We've talked about this before. This will be interesting as we move forward with this podcast, because since getting in my bike accident and getting whacked up on my head, sometimes my short-term memory is not as good as it once was. But we have talked in the past about having a value of your own time, right? Mm-hmm. And you really have to understand what that number is. I think when you're approaching anybody, like, am I willing to spend this much time for this much money? And it really actually is that simple, right? And I extend this out to when I am looking at flights, when I am trying to figure out if I'm going to drive somewhere, like how long is it going to take and what am I going to be able to do in that time period? And when you're proposing something to someone, you are theoretically the expert on the matter. So you will understand how much money it's going to take to make you do it in a way where you don't feel like you've lost early on in the project. I feel like that's like the main thing, right? Like, can you start with momentum?
And the other thing too, I think that's really difficult there, right, is that you spoke about the quick no.
Yeah.
So it can be so helpful to just have a quick no. I mean, I had a experience recently that I told you about where someone quoted me super high on something, and I literally was not even I wasn't willing to negotiate at all. Over there. So I think that the worst advice that I could give somebody is, just like put a number up that's higher than what you'd be willing to accept. I think that's terrible advice.
I hate that, because you're dealing with two segments of the population, right? Many people grew up and were taught that they're supposed to negotiate everything. And as a person who is a horrible negotiator, like if you want something out of me, super easy. I'm just going to tell you what I need, and then you're going to be able to get me down because I started where I need, because I don't want to go too high ever. It's probably one of my biggest faults. But then you're dealing with people who really genuinely do want to negotiate. So I think, again, you got to know your client, right?
Yep.
Is this person asking for a lower number because societally they're supposed to ask for a lower number? Or do they actually need a lower number? And having that discernment is very valuable to understand where we're going. So,
and having it super early.
Super early. So I had somebody reach out to me a couple weeks ago. They bought a building and they need to... they want to do a renovation project, let's call it a $2.5 million deal, and they don't know how to do it. They know it works. Well, that is perfect for a guy who is like, I should be doing consulting because it's a lot easier. It is a lot easier. And so I sat down, I looked at it, and I went through and I did the math and thought, this is what I want my time to be worth, and this is how many hours I'm going to put in it. I did the math, and I was like, feels a little high to me. And so I actually discounted my own number right off the rip and said, if I look at it from 5,000 feet down, and I said, well, if I could do this whole thing, which I know how to do, this would be my number. And I sent it.
But did you break it down for them?
I broke down my rationale for them.
So I think that's incredibly helpful, right?
And mine was the first volley. Uh-huh. And because I think I broke down, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. It was 4 things. And I'm going to do it with 3 people. And here is person 1, person 2, person 3, and then you'll have myself as the subject matter expert. And I'm bringing on these 3 people, and here are their costs, right? And so now it's not just hiring a company, you're hiring people, right? These are the people that are going to do it. And I think because my rationale was strong and well thought out, and I took 2 weeks to respond, right? I didn't just throw a number out there. This group came back and they said, yeah, we want to work together. We accept your number. Can we talk about payment terms?
Yeah, great. And I feel like those types of negotiations are good to enter
They're
into.
healthy. Yeah.
Those are healthy things to enter into.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about especially when we buy buildings.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about how we give the number that would pay for the building.
Yes.
No negotiation.
Consistently. That's what I do.
No negotiation. I get so frustrated with negotiating on buildings because I'm like, no, this is what I would pay for it.
It's funny because I buy a lot of buildings, and I have spent the better part of 8 years drilling into people's heads. I don't actually care what your building is worth. If you are coming to me, you're coming to me because it needs to be fixed, and that's what I'm good at. I'm good at the fixing part. Well, the fixing part costs this, and it doesn't matter what condition your building is actually in. Here's what I can pay for it to make my part work. I was so consistent with that messaging that I can think of 3 brokers right off the rip who call me all the time with things. And they say, hey, I got a guy and he's trying to sell this building. And I go, what does he want for it? And the brokers are now conditioned to say to me, well, I told him you'd only pay $30 a foot. And I was like, okay, does he still want to talk? And because I've been consistent in my language, now part of that is also that there aren't a lot of buyers around here. And so you sort of have to deal with the idiots who just beating people over the head with the number. But they're conditioned at this point to understand that's where I'm coming from.
And what's interesting, so if you translate this to Dean's business, right, you're almost talking about a referral network. So I do feel
a little bit.
So I do feel what's helpful, because you said I condition people to kind of think this way, right? And so if Dean has clients who are paying him the rate that he wants to be paid,
yes,
and then they can bring him clients that say, hey, this rate is worth it and this is why, I feel like that is the optimal situation.
And really what we're saying here is you need to work with people who value the product that you are giving them.
Absolutely.
Right? So I've used recruiting services before, and like Dean's group, and when they work, they're incredible, right? You feel like you got such value, and when they don't work, it's a very frustrating experience. I think that extends to the whole world, right? When it's good, and when it's not. And I think you just need to focus solely on, is the correct value there? And then if we're going to branch off of it, I would work with Heidi on a project, and I wouldn't charge you for my time because, well, obviously you're my friend. But if I just met you, I could make a case that working with you is going to lead me to 6 different people that I would also like to meet who I can work with. And there's a value to that relationship mining as well.
So hi, I'm Heidi, belated introduction. I'm a consultant. I typically work with economic developers and founders and other people who are interested in building out an entrepreneurial ecosystem. If you would like to work with me, find me at my website, HeidiKnoblauch.com. And that's linked in the show notes. So I would like to go back to Eugene for a second, right? Because I feel like creative people get this, oh, we'll give you exposure. We'll give you exposure all the time. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Exposure does not.
I hate it.
Absolutely.
And I hate it because I made the mistake, right? Early on in my life where I was running around with no money and trying to figure out how to get things done, I would try to make the case to people I'm going to put this out in front of 10,000 people and they're going to see this. And, it wasn't coming from a bad space. I thought I was probably helping until you start to get educated by people who are working in that world. This is the importance of education, is understanding what's happening out there. And people can't pay for exposure. And especially in our area where the exposure is so limited, right?
Right.
The better thing for me to do from an exposure standpoint is, hey, I can introduce you, Eugene, to 5 property owners that I think would be willing to do a mural. Here they are. Right?
Yeah. And I think, so for someone like Dean, right, if he cuts his fee or cuts his rate, if he does that for me, I'm never paying him more.
Never. No.
And so I think that that's a real struggle, right? Because if you take a client for a reduced fee because you think it'll lead to something else.
Yeah. Unless he's willing to say no.
Right.
Like on the he can go back and say, well, I'll do that to show you that it works, but on the second one, this is my fee.
Right.
And then it depends on who he's actually working with. And if you are willing to say, no, I'm walking away, there's a lot of power in that.
I feel like the resonating theme from this podcast is like, be careful who you work for and work with people who you want to work with and who you respect and who respect you.
Yeah, who right off the rip understand value. But again,
Right.
I realize I'm coming from such a privileged position there, right? Of like, this is for like 15 years into a very public career where I put myself out there and have value propositions everywhere, right? Like I have relationships 15 years ago that have not borne fruit yet that I think will one day do so. But I've also been able to plant those seeds as part of a long-term strategy. And if we're talking to somebody who's 25 years old and trying to get started, this is going to be very challenging. It's good to practice.
Do both. You can do both simultaneously.
You can do both simultaneously, but what you want to be is you want to be methodical in the long-term strategy of making sure you are consistently working with people who value what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm working for a few people right now on the side doing consulting work that don't fully understand the value, and I know I'll never work with them again. And then I'm working with some people that really do get it, and it may bear a lot of fruit long term. So it's not easy though. This is not killing what you eat is not an easy proposition. So like when we're talking about like what does future value look like, I actually I would describe it in a way where it was done to me, and I learned what it was. And so 15 years ago, when I started to do my very first project, I went out and I needed a partner. And I went to someone who I thought liked me. And that was like my main thing. Like, if he likes me, it's going to be harder to say no. And there's truth to that, right? I was also asking somebody for, 10 cents who had $1 million. So it's, add zeros to both numbers. And it was still a large number, but I wasn't putting him out. And I knew that. But what this person did in investing in me was understanding that if I was successful, then when I grew, he was going to grow just by being in close proximity to me. And this person who did invest in me a long time ago has benefited from my work and my relationships over the past 10 years in a really amazing way where I can call him and he can call me. And whenever we ask someone for a favor between the two of us, we know that we're both going to make money. And you don't actually have to, you don't have to gut check it. I can call this person right now and say, here's what I'm thinking. He'll immediately wipe it away if it's bad or say yes if it's good and send me off down this path. But he made this investment a long time ago where I am inclined to bring things to him because he did something for me.
So the one thing I just want to lob out there.
Yeah.
What I get a lot, so the value that I bring oftentimes is my relationships and my knowledge, period. So that phone call that is, I can make something happen for somebody in 3 seconds that they either would never be able to do or would take them 6 months.
Yeah.
And like for you, I would just do it, right?
Of course.
But something that I get asked a lot of times is like, hey, can I pick your brain on something?
Yeah, that's challenging.
Oh, it's so challenging because I want to just let them pick my brain.
You're not a no person. You're a yes person.
And it's also so easy for me.
Yeah, I think you and I both feel good when someone says, can I pick your brain about something? Especially if we respect them.
Yes.
Right? Especially if we're like, oh, I like you. And they're like, I want to pick your brain on something. I'm like, okay. My can I pick your brain percentage is I'm probably like a 92% yes, you can pick my brain.
Me too.
Which is really bad.
Yeah, I know.
It's not good for my own personal health.
I know, me too.
It's hard to say no to people because you're inclined to say, yeah. And what's so interesting is you just connected something for me that I didn't intuitively understand. When we were talking with Kevin O'Brien a couple of weeks ago, what I love about Kevin is he has this affect where he can like needle you with like just like a thing, and he's like, oh, we didn't have a lot of women come through the IDA. And I said, well, that's interesting because I have 50 plus commercial tenants, and the majority of them are definitely women solopreneurs. Kevin goes, yeah, good for you. But I started thinking like, why is that? And you know what it is? It's because I take every meeting.
Yeah, totally.
Right? I take every single meeting, and that has led to, I say all the time, like of the 50 commercial tenants I have, like 45 of them are personal relationships. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because those relationships span a very broad spectrum. I don't just say yes to people who can help me. In fact, I say yes to people who can't help me way more than I can. And you know what? I actually love that about myself, even though I know it's damaging to
I say yes to every meeting.
Everyone.
And Kelly, my wife, was like, she was in an elevator with some people yesterday, and they said, "Oh, I see that Heidi's doing a podcast." And Kelly goes, "I don't know what my wife does." And I think that most of what I do, I have such a deep network. I was in New York City the other day, and I knew 90% of the people who were there. And it spanned upstate, downstate.
Yeah.
You know, it was a very large pitch event for Columbia and SUNY.
Yeah.
And I knew 90%, easily 90% of the people there. And people were just like, "How do you know this person? How do you know this person?" You know, like that.
Yeah.
It was just that air of, and it's because I say yes to every meeting.
Yes.
Every single meeting.
Yeah.
Someone says, "Do you want to mentor something?" Sure, yeah.
It's currency. That's a form of currency.
But I think what's interesting for Dean and for Eugene, for both of them, is that currency, at a certain point, you actually need to make money from it.
Yes. That's where when I lobbed privilege out at you, right? Like you, Heidi, are in a place where you can take every meeting.
That's right.
Right? And and I think that there's an unbelievable test case for how to build a healthier society is you meet and talk with people about their problems, right?
Yeah.
And so I think you are more aligned with, we have really great, fantastic off the podcast conversations about how we would fix the world because it's naturally something we just like talking about.
Yep. Last week, the hot take was it's okay to ask someone for the purpose of the meeting before you have the meeting with them.
Yeah.
And I am only just learning that, I have to tell you, because people say like, "Oh, hey, can I meet and like pick your brain?" I'll be like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Yeah. But now all of a sudden I'm in a position where, yes, I teach at the University at Albany, but I'm also selling my knowledge essentially and selling my knowledge. And so it's this interesting pivot for me that is not natural. I have to say it's not natural. And so I actually, from knowing Eugene and from knowing Dean, they are people who want to help. And so you have these people who naturally, like, I would imagine that Eugene, when presented with a large mural project, wants to do the project.
Yeah, of course.
So, like, I want to do the project, right?
Right.
And so then what do you do when someone's nickel and diming you?
You get depressed. Like it's a serious comment, right? Like I think there's not a lot you can do because they have what you need, and you have to have that number in your head of this is what I'm worth, and I have to stick to it. Yeah,
I honestly think it's this combination, and you hit it on the head, right? With it's these developing of long-term relationships and doing projects that pay the bills at the same time, and so one of the things that I think that Eugene and Dean can both do, right, is say, like, what is my time worth for widening my funnel? Because that is really one of the only ways to increase the number of, like, converted people, right? I mean, there's other ways, too. You can be better at selling. You could be better at negotiating. But my strategy is to widen the funnel.
I think we share the same strategy.
I do, too.
It's interesting. I think my strategy is advanced by exhaustion, maybe. So one of the things that I've done lately, because I need to wrestle back control of my life because I have so many things going on, is I've tried to stop taking every meeting. And I very specifically, for about 6 months now, have left my Fridays open. And it allows me on a Thursday to gut check my energy and then say to 6 or 7 people on Thursday night, "Hey, do you want to meet?" What I'm doing there is I'm qualifying ahead of time the person's intentions of meeting with me, right? If you really genuinely need something from me, then you will shift your schedule, which is, I know how arrogant that sounds, but like we are all humans who have a finite amount of energy that we cannot just replenish by snapping our fingers. And I told you last week, hey, try this one out. And it's especially easy now because people lose focus beginning well, really today, right? Today's the day before Thanksgiving when we're taping this. And this is like when people lose focus between now and New Year's. Bless you if you're trying to get something done in the next 5 weeks. So I have said to people over the past couple of weeks, hey, I'm totally swamped. That's true. Can we get together after the first of the year? That is true. 3, sorry, I know that may be an inconvenience, but I really, truly am swamped. And I just put it out there like that. And then I let people come back to me and say yes or no, right? Yeah. And some of them ignore me. And then other people will actually send an email and say, here's what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And just put it in an email form. And then I can just respond back really quickly and say yes or no. And I saved myself an hour of my time just by qualifying up front what was actually going on.
So this week's hot take is that if you have a wardrobe and stick with it, then you do not have to think about your outfit in the morning. I set my clothes out every night for the next morning because I just can't possibly think about what to wear. You have 8 of the same flannel, so I feel like maybe you don't set out your outfit in the morning, but you can just go to your closet and get the same shirt.
Well, it's a mindset for me. Really what I'm seeking when I take a shower and get dressed in the morning is I just want to be comfortable. And it's weird for people because I dress like this no matter where I'm going. So, I had big meetings yesterday with important people, and at this point, they all expected me to show up. And but I'm different than my cohorts in real estate development who are still wearing suits and ties, and it's just not who I am. So I think my takeaway is like I better function in what I'm trying to pull off when I'm comfortable with what and who I am. Mm-hmm. This is who I am. I like wearing a hat because the lights bother me and give me headaches, and I don't like having headaches. So I will literally always have a hat on.
I have a rod. So we have 2 stories in our house, and the second story is a loft.
Yeah.
And in the loft, I hung just a rod that comes out like this.
Yeah.
And I hang my clothes to wear the next day
Yeah.
every night. So I come home, I go upstairs, I put on my pajamas and my slippers, and then I pick out my clothes from the closet and hang them, because I think that I kind of want to embody like that guy from American Psycho.
Okay.
You know?
That's great.
American Psycho, but like in Nassau, New York.
Well, I think what you're looking for is routine.
Yes,
right?
100%.
Like routine is the basis of calm, especially when you have the ability to not be calm. And I have the ability to very much not be calm. So I do things like I have to make my bed every day. And I keep track of how many days in a row I keep my bed made because I got up and I did that. Like, sometimes you just got to get up and wash your face to get out of your own funk. So for me, knowing that I don't have to put on a suit and be comfortable or uncomfortable all day, and I can just, I guess there's an ego thing associated with it right now where it's like I do business on my terms, and that is that can be fulfilling and it can drive you a little bit.
So I think for me, it's that I don't pair my socks very well. And if I'm looking for different socks in the morning, I'm going to lose my mind.
Someone made fun of my socks on a comment on Instagram.
You always wear fantastic socks.
I don't even know what I have on today.
Oh, nice.
Oh, my vote for Leslie Knope.
That's really
good. Vote for
good.
Knope socks. Yeah.
That's really good.
I was doing an engagement one time where we were talking, and it was like a big thing with like important people. And I had like funky socks on, and someone asked me what my socks were, and I didn't pay attention to them. I just put them on. And I looked down, and they were my Ron Swanson Woman of the Year socks.
That's beautiful.
And I was like, they say Woman of the Year. Whoops.
That's really good. The other thing that I think is a huge underlying theme of this podcast is to have those upfront conversations, especially about money.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be the first thing out of your mouth, and it does not have to be crass, like, hey, do you have the budget for this? But it's like, what for Eugene, for example, is just, have you set aside any money for this project?
That's 100%. The money is an important qualifier. And then, as I always seem to do with you, I also want to say, but on my own strategy is if someone reaches out to me and I'm genuinely intrigued by what they do and have no experience in it at all, I immediately accept the meeting. Because if it's an opportunity right off the rip to just learn, there's nothing more important than learning. So if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, I have no idea how this actually just popped in my head. We should do a Formula One race around the streets of Albany, Schenectady, Troy, and Saratoga. If somebody was like, I want to do a Formula One, I know that that's not possible. And I know that the person who's going to explain it to me is a crazy person who can't get it done. But the idea is so wild. The potential of learning something is so wild that my true currency is knowledge. And if you can offer me something I don't already know, I'm all in no matter what. That's more of an anecdote than a but.
Yeah, I think, and helpful.
That's what I like about you. You have these like unbelievable swaths of knowledge, and I have no idea where you gleaned them from at all. It's like, because you just sort of appeared here, right? Like, it was like, oh, Heidi did this, and then showed up in Troy. And then as I've gotten to know you over the past decade, it's like, why do you know so many things?
I know a lot about oysters.
Yeah, sure.
Do you know what we didn't talk about on this podcast related to budget?
What?
Or at least I think related to budget? Is you spoke a lot about the people taking meetings from people that you learn something.
Yeah.
And I think the key there is that gives you energy.
Oh, for me, yeah, 100%.
I would guess that Dean negotiating with a company or an HR department does not give him energy.
It's cumbersome at best.
Yeah. Very frustrating, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that being clear that like there are meetings that I take because they give me energy, and most of them do, and that's a personality thing too.
It's an introvert extrovert thing, right?
Yes.
So I am decidedly, and no one ever believes this, decidedly introverted.
Same.
Like I am so introverted, it's gross. You put me in a room with 100 people, I can find a way to exit within 30 seconds, right? I do
You
not
do a lot of
want to be there.
Irish goodbyes.
I'm the king of the Irish goodbye. Just like peace out. I'm not even trying. And it's becoming even crazier now that more people know like of me than know me. So they will walk up to me and just be like, hey, saw you're working on this thing, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, can you introduce yourself? Because you just walked up to me and I have no idea who you are. But in a one-on-one setting, in a 3-person room of talking podcast setting, this extroverted tendencies come out and the energy is fulfilling. But after this, like, yeah, toast. I'll talk to you Saturday.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, right?
I do think that is the feature of an introvert, right? Is that these types of things drain me.
Yeah.
I don't get energy from meeting with people.
Yeah, I'm giving you. So I do get energy from meeting with people, but it's a one-on-one.
Sure.
Whereas in a group setting, this is why like I struggle to go to chamber events, right? Where it's like, I get it. This is what we're doing. But really what we're doing is we're all connecting. We're doing this thing. And there's not a real value proposition for me. Whereas if someone walked up to me at an event and said, hey, I want to open up a waste disposal plant in downtown Albany because I can do.
The restaurant was the worst for me.
Oh, yeah, because people are coming to you and they're assuming if you opened up a restaurant, you like people.
I literally would go home and I would say, Kelly, you cannot speak to me.
So healthy.
Yeah.
Such
and
a good thing.
I would need like 4 hours.
Yeah.
Just
to decompress. Because people were going out into a situation, and it was interesting. You were providing them what you wanted. You were providing them what they wanted, but didn't want to actually be a part of the experience.
That's true.
I struggle with that a lot.
Yeah.
I can't, like, I struggle with ribbon cuttings. I struggle with all sorts of, like, I did my thing. Please go.
When I think about attracting people to what I'm doing or repelling them if they were not in line, I think a lot of it, and I think you would agree with this, is energy. For me, it's like I feel it. Either we're going to vibe or we're not going to vibe.
Yeah.
And if we don't vibe, I think I actually do a pretty good job. So this is my strategy. I haven't told you this strategy.
I know instantly when you're vibing and when you're not vibing with people.
Absolutely.
So go ahead and tell me your strategy.
My strategy is I'll tell people that I'll be at an event and they can find me at the event.
Okay.
And then if they want to talk to me, I'll have a conversation with them. And if at that point I need to say, I don't think that like I can help you with whatever you're doing, then I say it at the time.
Interesting.
Because the event is actually helpful for me because it's a set period of time. where there's a lot of other people around.
Neutral ground.
Neutral ground. Yeah, neutral ground. Exactly. So I typically, like, if I really need to let somebody down, I'm not going to do it at an event. But, like, if somebody is like, I find that I get a lot of reach out and I just don't, some people I just don't connect with. Like, I just can't help them, or they're being vague with what they want help with. And I think being just the quick no, being honest is like helpful to me.
For a very long time, I was good at attracting all energy. I think I even made like a name for myself by being able to bring people together and bridge divides to get things done. I think that was one of my skill sets early in my career. And I got very good at it. And as I have grown tired of apathy in people, I have rejected that I am good at it. And I've gone the other direction in a very unhealthy way. So I think it's important when you're not good at something to say, I'm not good at it and here's why. So there are a bunch of people right now in this region who are in my circle of trust on the project that I'm working on that we were discussing earlier, very large project. And a number of them are encouraging this very stubborn person to go out and build a coalition around the idea, so I'm not going it alone, and have other people of different statures and different places in life inside, the cone of trust, and have a group that you can go to battle with. And I don't have it in me. I don't have the energy to convince people anymore that what I'm trying to do is right, and I'm totally at peace with it. Even though, listening to the question, I know I'm wrong and I'm actually harming my ability to get it done, I actually don't have the ability to do it because of the concept of what you're saying of like, you also need to repel the bad energy while you're attracting the good energy. And this is circumstantial, but in this moment, there is more negative energy than good energy. And so I don't want to let any energy in, because I can't spend time getting rid of the bad energy when I know here are 10 people that are going to be with me, and I'll build my coalition around them.
So I think the one thing I would add to that is that I think you suffer from often being right.
Thank you.
So Jeff and I share an attorney, and she is just fantastic. And one of the things that she says about you is just like, it's very, like Jeff, he ends up oftentimes being right. And so I think that what you're sick of is people not believing that you're right, because you've proven that you're right over and over and over and over again. And sometimes I think that has frustrated people, because what that means is you've proven them wrong.
Whew. Yeah, it's that thing I said to you earlier in the week that when we're talking about what's going against us, let's say as entrepreneurs, what is going against us is often, we live in this Amazon culture where we're just clicking and ordering, and we're not doing anything that we should be doing to build community. And when you're an entrepreneur and you're looking up at this mountain you're trying to scale, there are a lot of people on that mountain that are going to doubt you. And if those doubters would doubt themselves as much as they're doubting you, that mountain would flatten out in a hurry and you'd be able to go. But that's not the way the world works. And so we become tired of the doubters not doubting themselves, but just doubting the person who's trying to infect the region with a little bit of change.
I would just argue that you probably had more tolerance for it when you didn't have so many wins.
When I needed other people. When
you needed other people.
Yeah.
And so now I think it is just.
But it's not good. Like I would say that I had a phone call this morning on the way up here with a gentleman that I'm partnering with who is not from this area at all, and probably 100 times more successful than me. And we had some meetings here yesterday that, he said, handle it, you know what you're doing. And I said, here's what I'm thinking. And he walked through, he goes, that's right, that's how you should do it. And he's actually embracing this energy I'm talking about, because what he's looking for is a quick no. And if it's a quick no, then I don't need to go spend my valuable time in a place I don't even know. And so I am so for the quick no, that it's a little bit disabling, even though I know it's good, right? I don't want to waste any more time here. And if that means that something gets left to the side, even though it could have been fixed, so be it.
So as this relates to our questions today,
Yeah.
around budget, around, all of that stuff, I think the other underlying thing today is the quick no.
Yeah.
Because if you can get quick no's and get more people in the funnel, all the better.
We should do an entire segment on this, because I got to tell you, like, I'm thinking as we're talking here, like I'm actively working on a deal that I sort of hope blows up, because it has been too much of a pain. And if it's too much of a pain up front, I know it's going to be too much of a pain long term. And so I value my word more than anything else. So I'm doing what I'm supposed to do to get it done. And if that doesn't work, so be it. It doesn't work. It's a no, and I'm going to move on to the next thing.
So for Dean and Eugene.
Yeah, I mean, they're two wildly different people. For Dean, I think your advice of casting a wider funnel, 100% accurate, right? Just like as many people, because it feels like it's the type of business that could just really thrive on referrals, right? Like I work with a very specific group in that area because I've been impressed with what they do, and that's who I send people to. With Eugene, he is sort of in a position where, boy, this is hard to say to somebody, especially on a podcast to a voicemail, but like sort of he might be in a position where he needs to be a martyr, right? And when you try to grow things, sometimes martyrdom is needed.
So what I think?
Yeah.
I think he needs to go where he's valued.
Well, so much easier said than done. Like we could just tell him, hey, go to Philadelphia and start doing murals, right? But also like, I see this is where you and I actually start to differ a little bit, because I like to send people where they're needed. And so like to Eugene, who is trying to figure out how to get some cheap bastard to pay for a mural, like the reality is like that mural is absolutely necessary in that neighborhood to spark revitalization, and he's the key. But sometimes like the key doesn't actually get rewarded, and that's where we need to build. That's why you need to build community, so that there's a way to actually have people that can function as martyrs but not have to suffer the martyrdom. I entered into a negotiation earlier this year to do some consulting agreement. Heidi is aware of it, and I was on the fence. But I said to the gentleman, how much money are you going to put into this thing? And he gave me his number. And I said, okay, I can make it so that it's half. And so let's say it's $10 and I can do it so it's $5. But obviously it was much, much, much more sizable. So I could save him, let's say, several $1 million. And the way I actually handled the negotiation, and I don't even know where this came from. It wasn't like I read it in a book and did it. But I said to him, hey, I'm willing to do it. Throw a number at me. And he goes, well, what do you charge? And they go, nah. I said, I told you what I can do for you. Now come back and give me a number. And that was on a Friday. And I hung up the phone. I was like, that's how I should live my life, right? I'm just going to say to this guy, here's what I can do for you. He knows at this point that I can do it for him. And like, throw a number at me. And it was either going to be a yes or a no. I had zero intention of negotiating because, I'm not a good negotiator. And he came back at literally 3 times what I was going to say I would charge. 3 times. And I said, yeah, sure. That sounds like a fair number. And it's been a great time, doing a good job. It's going to work. And sometimes if you just go for it, like a Eugene, I think could actually take that and like try it out on somebody and say, here's what I can do. Here's what it'll look like. Here's how long it's going to take. Here's my cost. Not me making money. Here's my cost. Throw a number at me.
Yep. The other thing that I feel like is helpful to do is and it's difficult with Eugene and it's difficult with Dean, so this is not necessarily advice for them, but for me, I can scope down a project to show my value. So meaning like, if you sit down with me, and I think you know this, right? If I give you 4 hours of my time, that's going to be like 3 months of your time, right?
Yes.
Because those 4 hours will accomplish so much.
Yeah.
So if those 4 hours plus a deliverable happen, I don't have to charge a lot for that. And then people can see what the value is and they can move from there.
Yeah, it's a value proposition, right?
Totally. But people are sometimes unwilling to do the larger, like, to do the larger dollar amount. They're not super willing to do that. And so either because of the time commitment or because of the money involved or whatever the thing may be, I think that sometimes if you just scope it down for people, so like for instance, most government agencies have a cap for how much like a department head can write a check for, and it's $50,000.
Okay.
So I know when I'm going to the government to make my price less than $50,000
Sure.
because it's a decision maker. I know that in that case, I've already qualified them, so I know that they have the budget and I know that they're in pain. And so I kind of live by that for other, like I try to find out what the budget is for things, like how much money someone has to do something. And then once I know that and I know my value, I don't have to say, no, I'm not going to work with you. I just like, I can't work with you for more than 6 weeks.
All right. So we have 3 takeaways today. 1, know your own value. 2, know who your customer is. And 3, seek the quick no.
Yes, I love it. And seek the quick no by figuring out their budget, figuring out their pain.
Yeah, maybe seek isn't the right word. Maybe embracing the quick no is like.
Well, no, I think I like seek.
Yeah.
I like seek because you should figure out quickly if they are qualified to let you sell to them.
You are going to exponentially be able to grow your business no matter what it is if you are specifically working with people who are going to embrace it. And so finding quick no's opens up new paths to people who will say yes.
1,000%.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you want to call in and chat next week, the phone number here at the Heidi and Jeff podcast is 518-680-6545. It's 518-680-6545. Cool, it's been great. Happy we're doing this. Really love it. And I really love short goodbyes.
Same.